The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a grocery circular and a water bill, as if it were nothing, as if what was inside hadn't taken years to build toward. I stood at the mailbox in my garden clogs, the morning still cool, and I read my daughter's name on the return address. Then I read the name of the law firm beneath it. I went inside and sat down before my legs could decide for me. My daughter was filing for legal guardianship over my affairs. The papers said I was no longer capable of managing my own finances, that I had shown, and I'm using their exact words here, a pattern of impaired judgment and vulnerability to outside influence. There were 2 pages of examples. The charitable donation I'd made to the children's hospital where my late husband spent his final weeks, the money I'd transferred to help my neighbor Ruth Ann cover her heating bill last February when the pipes froze, the small account I'd quietly opened for my granddaughter Sophie without telling anyone. Love, apparently, now required a diagnosis. I am 69 years old. I taught 2nd grade for 34 years in the same elementary school in Denton, Ohio. I balanced my own checkbook before my daughter learned to tie her shoes. I bought this house outright after selling the one her father and I raised her in, and I did it without asking anyone's permission or opinion. I have never missed a bill. I have never forgotten an appointment. I have never, not once, given anyone reason to question whether the lights were on inside my head, but my daughter had decided otherwise, and she'd found a lawyer willing to agree with her. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time that morning. The coffee I'd poured before going to the mailbox had gone cold. Outside, the cardinal that visits my feeder every day was doing his usual rounds, unbothered, indifferent to paperwork. I envied him that. Her name is Carla. She's 43, lives 20 minutes away in a newer development, with her husband Dennis and their 2 children, Sophie, who is 12, and Marcus, who just turned 9. We had been close once, genuinely close, the kind of mother and daughter who called each other on the drive home just to talk about nothing. That started to change after her father died. Grief does strange things to people. Some of it softens them. Some of it doesn't. Carla hardened. She started calling less. When she did call, the conversations felt managed, like she was running through a checklist. She'd ask if I was eating, if I was sleeping, if I'd seen the doctor recently, but not in the way you ask when you love someone. In the way you ask when you're building a file, I noticed. I just didn't know what I was noticing yet. The first real sign came about 8 months before the guardianship papers arrived. I had decided to update my will. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that should have concerned anyone. I simply wanted to leave a portion of my estate to the children's hospital and a small amount to the local library, where I've volunteered every Thursday for 11 years. The rest would still go to Carla and the grandchildren. It was my money, earned over a lifetime, and I felt good about what I'd decided. I made the mistake of mentioning it at Sunday dinner. Carla set down her fork. Dennis looked at the wall. The kids kept eating, unaware that something had shifted in the room. "How much?" she asked. I told her. She didn't yell. That wasn't her style. She just went very quiet in a way that had a texture to it, dense and cold, like the air before a storm you can't see yet. She said she thought we should talk about it more before I made any decisions. She said she was worried about me, that I'd seemed different lately. A little scattered. I had not seemed scattered. I had made a deliberate, considered choice about my own property, but I let it go that night. I drove home thinking she'd come around. Instead, she called 3 times that week to ask if I was sleeping well, whether I'd been confused about anything, whether I'd talked to anyone who'd been pressuring me. The word pressuring, as if the library had sent someone to my door in a trench coat. Over the next few months, I felt myself being watched, not followed, not physically, but observed, catalogued. Carla started showing up unannounced, which she had never done before. She'd look around my house with an expression I can only describe as searching. She'd ask to see my mail. Once, she opened my refrigerator and made a note on her phone about something inside it. I asked her what she was writing. "Just keeping track," she said. "For your sake." I should have said something sharper then. I should have asked her whose sake it really was for. But I loved her, and love makes you give people chances they haven't earned. When the papers came, I understood finally that she hadn't been worried about me. She had been preparing a case. I didn't call her that day. I didn't call anyone. I sat with it the way I've learned to sit with hard things, letting it settle before I decide what to do. My husband used to say I was the most patient woman he'd ever met. He meant it kindly. That Tuesday, I needed it. By evening, I had read the filing 3 times. The language was careful, clinical, stripped of any warmth. It described me as an aging individual exhibiting difficulty with complex financial decisions and susceptibility to undue influence. It listed the hospital donation, the neighbor's heating bill, the account for Sophie. It noted that I had made these transactions without consulting family. I underlined that last part. Without consulting family. As if my money required their approval. As if 69 years of functioning well in the world had some expiration date that only my daughter could see. I went to my desk and took out a yellow legal pad. I wrote at the top, what I know. Then I started listing every account, every balance, every transaction from the past 3 years, with dates and reasoning. I wrote for 2 hours. By the time I stopped, I had 4 pages of clean, organized, entirely coherent financial history. I looked at it and thought, bring the judge. The next morning I called an attorney. His name was Richard Owens, referred to me by a woman in my Thursday library group, whose son had tried something similar 2 years prior. Richard was in his late 50s, direct but not unkind, with the kind of steady voice that doesn't flinch when you describe something terrible. I told him everything. He asked good questions. He didn't treat me like I was fragile or confused. He treated me like a woman who had a problem that needed solving, which is exactly what I was. Here's what they're arguing, he said, spreading the filing on his desk. They're claiming diminished capacity based on what they're calling erratic generosity. He looked up at me. The good news is that generosity, even significant generosity, is not evidence of incapacity. The standard for guardianship is high. They'll need a medical evaluation, and that cuts both ways. I told him about my own doctor. 30 years, same physician, same practice. I had a full checkup 6 weeks before the filing. Everything was normal, including a routine cognitive screening. Perfect score. Richard nodded slowly. Call her office first thing tomorrow. We'll want her testimony. I asked him the question I hadn't been able to stop thinking about since Tuesday morning. Why would she do this? He was quiet for a moment, and I appreciated that he didn't answer too quickly. Sometimes, he said, it's fear of losing an inheritance they've already mentally spent. Sometimes it's control dressed up as concern. Sometimes people convince themselves they're protecting you when what they're really doing is protecting their own interests. He paused. Which one fits your daughter? I thought about Carla, about the way she'd looked at my house lately, measuring, about the comment she'd made at Christmas about what she'd do with the garden once it was hers. She'd laughed when she said it. I'd laughed too. I shouldn't have. Maybe all 3, I said. I didn't see Carla for 2 weeks after the filing. She didn't call. Neither did I. The silence between us was different from the comfortable quiet of people who know each other well. It was the silence of 2 people who have finally said what they actually mean, even if neither of them spoke a word. Sophie called me on a Saturday afternoon. She used the house phone, not her parents' cell, which told me something. Grandma, she said, her voice low and careful. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you? I heard Mom and Dad talking. She paused. About court stuff. I kept my voice easy. I know there's some disagreement happening. It's between the grown-ups. You don't need to worry about it. She was quiet a moment. Then, I don't think you're what they're saying you are. My throat tightened. What are they saying? That you're confused. That you've been making bad decisions. She hesitated. You're not confused, Grandma. You helped me with my history project last month, and you knew everything about the Civil Rights Act. More than my teacher. I almost laughed. I told her I loved her. I told her this would work itself out. I tried to mean it. After I hung up, I sat on the back porch for a long time. A neighbor's dog was barking somewhere down the street. The maple at the edge of my yard had just started turning, early this year, orange at the tips, like it was in a hurry to get somewhere. I thought about Sophie saying I'm not confused, Grandma with such certainty, the way children state truths that adults spend years dancing around. She had no stake in being right. She just was. I went inside and wrote her a note. A real one, on stationery, the kind I keep in the desk drawer. I told her she was observant and brave, and that those two qualities together were rarer than people thought. I told her whatever happened, she should always trust what she saw with her own eyes. I mailed it the next morning. 3 days before the hearing, Carla came to my door. She didn't ring the bell. She knocked, which she almost never did. I heard something different in the knock, a hesitation in it, and I stood in the hallway for a moment before I answered. She looked tired, not the tired of someone who'd been working hard, but the tired of someone who'd been carrying something they couldn't put down. She had her hair pulled back and no earrings, which for Carla was like wearing pajamas in public. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped back from the door. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd eaten 1,000 dinners growing up, where I'd helped her with geometry homework and listened to her cry over boys and watched her become someone I was proud of. For a long time, that was still who she was to me, even as things got complicated. Even now, looking at her across that table, part of me just wanted to make her tea. I didn't make her tea. She started with the word I'd been waiting for, Mom, just that. And then she looked at the table. I let her have the silence. I'd learned not to fill it for her. I didn't think it would go this far, she finally said. I waited. Dennis thought it was the right move. He kept saying we needed to protect the estate. Protect it from what? I thought, from the hospital where your father died. From my neighbor who couldn't afford heat. From other people making decisions about your money, she said quietly. I looked at her. What other people? She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said, You gave Ruth Ann $800, Mom. I gave Ruth Ann $800 because she is 74 years old and her furnace failed in February and she has no one else. I would do it again tomorrow. Carla pressed her lips together. I leaned forward slightly. What I need you to understand, Carla, is that you have confused generosity with incompetence. Those are not the same thing. I have never been confused about money. I have never made a decision I couldn't explain and account for. The only thing I've done is make choices you disagreed with. That's not all, she said. You didn't tell us about the account for Sophie. No, I didn't. Why? I looked at her steadily. Because it was between me and my granddaughter, and because I knew you'd try to stop it. She was quiet again, then lower. We didn't want to do this, Mom. It started as a conversation with a lawyer just to understand our options, and it ended with you filing to have a judge decide whether I can manage my own life. Her eyes went to the window. I'll tell you what I told Richard, I said. I have never missed a payment, never overdrafted an account, never given money under pressure or confusion. I have my doctor's evaluation, 3 years of bank records, and 11 years of volunteer service where people depend on me to show up and function. I will say all of that in front of a judge, and then it will be on record that you tried this. She turned back to me. Her eyes were wet, which I hadn't expected. I got scared, she said. After Dad died, I kept thinking, what if something happens to you? What if someone takes advantage? You were alone, and you kept giving things away, and I thought, you thought the solution was to take control from me. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. I've been alone for 6 years, I said, and in those 6 years I have managed this household, maintained my health, stayed connected to this community, and kept a relationship with your children that you've done nothing to build. I've been fine. More than fine. She wiped her eye quickly, the way she always did, like she was embarrassed to be seen doing it. I know, she said. I know you have. We didn't hug that evening. There was too much between us for that. But when she stood to leave, she paused at the door the way people do when they want to say one more thing and aren't sure they should. "I'm going to talk to the lawyer," she said, "about withdrawing." I nodded. "I'm sorry, Mom." I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I'd raised, who had somehow gotten so tangled up in fear and money and a husband's voice in her ear that she'd filed papers against her own mother. She was still my daughter. That hadn't changed. But something had shifted in how I held that fact. "I hear you," I said. "We'll see." She left. I closed the door and stood in the hallway by myself. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Carla filed the withdrawal 2 days before it. Richard called to tell me. "They've dropped it," he said. "All of it." I thanked him. I sat down. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something quieter. Something that felt less like winning and more like being confirmed. The thing I already knew about myself, documented now, real, on record, was that I was exactly who I had always been. The filing hadn't changed that. The withdrawal didn't change it either. But there's something about having your own daughter look at you and decide you need to be managed that leaves a mark. Dropping the case doesn't erase the fact that she picked up the pen. I went for a walk that afternoon, the same route I've taken most mornings since my husband died, through the neighborhood and down to the small park at the end of Millbrook, where the benches face east and you can watch the light change across the tree line. I sat for a long time. A man about my age sat 2 benches down reading a folded newspaper. A young mother pushed a stroller along the path. 2 boys on bikes rode by, arguing about something that only mattered to them. The world was doing exactly what it always did, moving forward, unimpressed by the things that feel enormous to us. I thought about the account I'd opened for Sophie. $60 a month. Nothing grand, but something accumulating quietly. Something that would be waiting for her when she was old enough to need it. Carla didn't know the details. She knew it existed. She'd called it secretive in the filing. I called it mine to give. Sophie left a note in my mailbox that Saturday. She must have walked over herself because I hadn't heard a car. It was folded in quarters, written in her rounded, careful handwriting on a piece of notebook paper with a cartoon sun drawn in the corner. "Grandma, I heard you won. I knew you would. Mom was crying at dinner, but I think it was the good kind. I told Marcus you were the toughest person we know. He said he knows. We both do. Can I come over Sunday and help you with the garden?" I read it twice. Then I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, the kind Sophie gave me 2 Christmases ago. Sunday, she came over in her old jeans and the flannel shirt she always grabbed from the mudroom. We pulled weeds for 2 hours and talked about her science fair project and the book she was reading, and a girl at school who'd been unkind in the complicated way girls that age can be. She asked me thoughtful questions and listened to my answers, and at one point she stopped working and looked at me and said, "You know a lot about people, Grandma." 34 years of second graders, I told her. "You learn." She grinned and went back to the weeds. That afternoon, I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, and we ate at the kitchen table without talking much, and it was easy, the way things are easy when you've been honest with each other, when there's nothing to manage or measure or protect against. Carla texted that evening. Brief, careful, still navigating. "I heard Sophie had a good time. Thank you for having her," I texted back. "She's always welcome here. You both are." There was a pause. Then, "I know. We'll talk soon." I put the phone down and looked around my kitchen. My kitchen, in my house where I have lived on my own terms for going on 6 years now. The dishes were drying in the rack. Sophie had left her jacket over the back of a chair. The cardinal was back at the feeder outside, same as always, same red against the darkening yard. Nothing had been handed back to me. It had never been taken, not truly. But I understood now that some people, even people who love us, will look at the life we've built and see something that needs managing rather than something that deserves respect. The difference between those 2 things is everything. I opened the desk drawer and took out a fresh piece of stationery. I didn't have anyone specific to write to. I just felt the need to put words down, to say something out loud, even if only to myself. I am 69 years old. I give money where I choose. I spend my Thursdays at the library. I maintain my own home, and my own accounts, and my own relationships. I buried a husband I loved, and I am still here, and still whole, and still deciding what to do with what I have left. No one gets to call that a problem. I folded the paper and left it on the desk. Then I went to water my plants, put on the kettle, and got on with the evening. The same way I always do, the same way I always will. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've ever been made to feel like your love was too much, or your independence was a burden, I hope you know you're not alone. Leave a comment below. Sometimes just knowing someone else has stood in this exact kitchen, read the same kind of letter, and stayed standing anyway, is enough to keep going.